Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Krishnaya Namaha. This is the Rukmini and Krishna wedding from the Play of God. The Play of God is written by Vanamali, a great devotee of Lord Krishna, who lives at her ashram in Hrishikesh. This is chapter 14, the abduction of Rukmini. Soon after the defeat of Jalasan, the marriage of his brother, and their consequent shift to Dwarka, Lord Krishna made his first marital alliance with Rukmini, the daughter of King Bhishmaka of the country of Vidarbha. The king had 5 sons and 1 daughter, noted for her beauty. The eldest child, a son, was Rukmi, and the youngest was the daughter, Rukmini. She had a character to match the loveliness of her face, and many were the princes who aspired for her hand. But she did not give a thought to any of them. Her grandfather was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, and from childhood she had grown up hearing stories about him. She vowed to herself that she would marry none other than the prince of the Yadavas, the sage Narad, who used to visit the palace often and regale her with stories of the greatness of Krishna, who was none other than Lord Vishnu incarnate. He also informed her that she herself was the incarnation of Lakshmi Devi, the consort of Vishnu, and that he alone was a fitting groom for her. Thus, from the age of 5 onward, her heart was completely fixed on the Lord. Though her father and grandfather were very happy with her choice, her eldest brother Rukmini was determined to give her in marriage to his friend Shishupal, the prince of Chedi, who was Krishna's cousin. Jalasan, who was still rankling from his defeat at the hands of the upstarts Krishna and Balram, was also nursing his grievance and biding his time to put down the might of the Yadavas. He had formed an alliance with King Bhishmaka of Vidarbha and King Dharmaghosh of Chedi. He gave his own granddaughter to Rukmi and urged him to get his sister to marry Shishupal, the son of Dharmaghosh. So Rukmi, without consulting either his father or his sister, arranged for a Swayamvara or wedding ceremony for his sister at Kundinapur, the capital of Vidarbha. Normally, many kings were invited to a Swayamvar and the bride could make her choice from among them. But this Swayamvar was only a farce, for he had determined to get her to marry the groom of his choice. He knew of her predilection for Krishna, and feared that she might refuse if she were given an ultimatum to marry Shishupal. All arrangements were made and invitations were sent to all places except Dwarka, before Rukmini was told. She was too horrified and pleaded with her father to intercede, but he was too old and frail and was a ruler in name alone. All decisions were in the hands of his son, and Rukmi would brook no arguments. In vain she begged her older brothers, but they were deaf to her pleas. At last, on the morn of the day previous to her wedding, alone and bereft, she lay in her bedroom sobbing her heart out, when suddenly there was a timid knock at the door. She did not hear, so the door opened a crack, and in stepped a Brahman of noble mien. "My lady, why do you weep so?" he asked. "It is your wedding eve, and you should be rejoicing rather than weeping." "I would rather it be the eve of my funeral," Rukmini said in a low voice, averting her face so that he could not see its disheveled state. "I am but a humble Brahmin, but I have known you from the time you were a child, and I would gladly do anything I can to help you. You have but to order me." Startled at this last-minute offer of help from such an unexpected quarter, she looked up and was struck with a daring idea. Her cheeks flushed and her heart beat fast at the audacity of what she had in mind, but without pausing to conjecture and weigh the pros and cons, she made an immediate decision, since that appeared to be her only hope. It is said that the Lord himself, in order to test her determination, had waited till the last moment and then instigated this plan of sending the Brahmin to her aid. "O revered one, will you take a letter to my Lord Krishna, sign of the Yadava race, residing at Dwarka, and bring back a reply before the wedding on the day after tomorrow?" Rukmini asked timidly. "Certainly," said the Brahmin. "I will willingly do anything for you." Not a word or a flicker of an eyelid did he betray the fact that he thought it unusual for a gently nurtured girl, a princess of her standing, to be writing letters to someone she did not know, especially on the eve of her wedding. Neither did Rukmini cast a thought to the correctness of her behavior. All she knew was that if she could not have Lord Krishna as her husband, she would rather die, and since death held no charms for her at the moment, she had to make an all-out effort to save herself. Like the gopis, her love was so great that her ego was completely obliterated, and her natural tendencies could not act as an obstacle to her union with the Lord. She felt that she was about to submerge in the waters of samsara, and that the only one who could save her was the Lord of her heart, who was also the God incarnate. Naturally, she clutched at whatever means were offered to her. "Make haste, O noble one," she said. "Take the fastest horse and speed away to Dwarka and back, for if he fails to arrive at the appointed time, I shall surely put an end to my life." The Brahmin disappeared in a trice. What powers he utilized to make the long journey from Vidarbha to Dwarka in such a short time is anybody's guess. Rukmini spent the rest of the time in an agony of suspense, at times elated, at times cast into despair. Sometimes she would think, "He is the Lord of all, surely he will not forsake me." Then she would say, "I am so unworthy, how can he ever want to marry me?" Thus she spent the day and night alternately crying and praying and longing with all her heart that he would answer her prayers. When the Brahmin reached Dwarka, it looked as if he was expected, for the guards at the gate allowed him to enter immediately, and he was taken without any loss of time to the Lord's presence, where Krishna welcomed him and took care of all his wants. After he was rested, the Lord inquired about the purpose of his visit, as if he knew nothing about it. "What part of the country are you coming from? Why have you taken the trouble to cross the sea and come to me? Are you in some trouble? Is there anything I can do for you?" Without preamble, the Brahmin, who knew well the urgency of the situation, bowed and said, "O Lord, I have not come for my own sake, but for the sake of your devotee, the Princess of Vidarbha, who has sent a letter through me for your kind perusal." Read it, Krishna commanded. And the Brahmin read out the tender message. "O Bhuvanasundar, handsomest one in the entire world," the letter began, "having heard of your wonderful qualities, my heart has left its keeping forever. O granter of liberation, who is the girl of noble birth, who has attained marriageable age, who will not choose you for the husband if she could have you. Therefore I have chosen you and offer myself to you, if you will deign to accept me as your wife. Do not allow the Prince of Chedi to appropriate me, for I belong to you alone. Whatever merit I might have acquired by way of sacrifices, austerities, and charities, I now offer in exchange for the honor of being accepted as your wife. If you will deign to accept this offering of my very self, then do you present yourself at the Swayamvar, which has been arranged for me, defeating the armies of Chedi and Magad. Do you capture and marry me according to the Rakshas rites, the bridal money paid on the occasion being nothing else but your might. If you are wondering how I might be carried away, I will give you a hint. On the morn of the wedding day, there will be a grand procession going to worship at the shrine of the goddess Parvati, situated just outside the palace. The bride will accompany this procession. This will be the most convenient time for you to stake your claim, O lotus-eyed one. If you fail to be gracious to me, I shall not despair. I shall fast unto death. This I shall do, life after life, until I get you as my husband." Was there a flicker of smile in the depths of those all-knowing eyes when he heard this gently worded threat? It is difficult to say, but when he had read this moving message, the Brahmin looked expectantly at his face and said, "I have brought this private message to you, O Lord of the Yadavas. Now whatever is to be done in this matter should be done immediately, for the Swayamvar takes place tomorrow." Krishna caught hold of the Brahmin's hands and said, "Away, O noble one, let us go immediately to Kundinapur and rescue the princess. I cannot get any sleep thinking of her." He who dwells in the hearts of all had already known what was in her heart, and had been waiting anxiously for her message. He ordered his charioteer, Daruka, to bring his chariot immediately. He hustled the Brahmin into the chariot, and left immediately for the country of Vidarbha, without waiting for the return of his brother Balram, who had gone on an expedition. When the latter returned, he was quite annoyed to find that Krishna had acted in his usual impetuous fashion, and had left without taking a fighting force. Having heard of his destination, he was sure that he would not be able to abduct the princess without some sort of skirmish, so he followed Krishna as fast as he could with a battalion. The Lord's 4 fleet-footed horses were known as Sebhya, Sugriv, Meghapushp, and Valaka, and they made short work of the distance between the another country in which lay Dwarka and Kundinapur, the capital of Vidarbha, and arrived there on the morn of the Swayamvar. Kundinapur was well decorated for the Swayamvar of its princess. The streets were swept and sprinkled with rose water. Multicolored flags and ornamental arches decked with garlands adorned the roads, and the perfume of burning incense emanated from all the houses. All the citizens were attired in their best, adorned with jewelry, sandal paste, and flower garlands. Learned Brahmins chanted mantras from the Rig, Sam, and Yajur Veds, while others, who were well versed in the Atharva Ved, offered oblations in the fire to the accompaniment of chants for the pacification of the planets. Just as Bhishmaka, the king of Vidarbha, was doing for his daughter, Ram Ghosh, the king of Chedi, was doing for the well-being of his son Shishupal, the proposed bridegroom. The bridegroom party started for Kundinapur, surrounded by an army with a cavalry full of elephants and horses, foot soldiers and chariots decorated with golden chains. They were given a royal welcome by the princes of Vidarbha and taken to a special apartment reserved for them. A large number of kings, such as Jarasandh, Salva, Dantavaktra, and Pondarak, who were all allies of Shishupal, were also assembled. The whole night, Rukmini had kept vigil from the top of the palace, looking out for the Brahmin's arrival. Morning dawned with no sign of him. Desperately, she prayed to the Lord. While she was thus praying, her left arm, eye, and thigh started throbbing, which was a sure sign of good fortune. Very soon, the Brahmin arrived and gave her the joyful news of Krishna's arrival in the city and his vow to carry her off by force if necessary. Her joy at hearing this was so great that she could think of no adequate recompense for the bringer of such news. Her eyes filled with joy and gratitude, and she prostrated herself before him. The Brahmin blessed her and departed. Next, the court ladies came to attend to her. She was dressed with infinite care, for she was going to meet her beloved for the first time. She peered anxiously into the mirror. Would he like her? Would he think her beautiful? He was plagued with 1,000 doubts, yet brimming with joy. The ladies wondered what had made the pensive maid of the previous day blossom into an excited and beautiful bride. Hearing that the Yadava princes had come to attend the Swayamvar, Bhishmaka was delighted. In his heart of hearts, he had wanted his daughter to marry Krishna, but he knew that his son had deliberately not sent him an invitation, and rejoiced that he had come uninvited. He went personally to receive Krishna, showered him with every mark of love and respect, and escorted him to the best residence, which by right should have been given to the bridegroom. Hearing of Krishna's arrival, all the citizens flocked to have a glimpse of his unique personality. They murmured among themselves that he alone was a fitting groom for the beloved Princess Rukmini. The time was approaching for the bridal procession to start for the temple of the goddess Parvati. Accompanied by a glittering array of married ladies, Rukmini set out on foot to worship the Divine Mother, but her mind was absorbed in the lotus feet of her Lord. Observing a vow of silence, she walked down the avenue, lined with soldiers bristling with swords, for Rukmini had heard rumors of Krishna's arrival and his vow to abduct the bride. Trumpets, conches, and kettle drums blared. Rose petals were strewn down the road, and Brahmin ladies, adorned with jewels, flowers, and sandal paste, preceded the bride. Singers, bards, and minstrels extolled her beauty as Rukmini walked down the route to the temple. But she heeded them not. Her attention was entirely focused on trying to have a glimpse of that beloved form. She peeped in vain through the folds of her transparent veil, but she could not see him. On reaching the temple, she washed her hands and feet, performed the purificatory rites with water, and entered the shrine, outwardly composed but inwardly agitated. She prayed to the Divine Mother, as the gopis of Vrindavan had done long ago, to help her procure the Lord Krishna as her husband. O Mother Parvati, again and again do I prostrate myself before you and before your children, Ganesh and Kartikeya. May you be pleased to grant my prayers to wed the Lord Krishna. May you be pleased to grant my prayers to have the Lord Krishna as my husband. Worship was offered to the goddess as well as to the Brahmin ladies who had accompanied her, and they in turn blessed her and gave her the consecrated remains of the offerings. Now she could break her vow of silence, and as she came out of the temple holding the hand of her lady in waiting. As she came out, she lifted her veil for a second, as if to make an offering of her beauty to the Supreme Being, as embodied in Lord Krishna. Crowds had gathered outside to catch a glimpse of her entrancing beauty, and she cast them a bewitching smile, which so enraptured the watching princes and kings that they lost control over their hands. Their weapons fell from their nerveless grasp, and they closed their eyes as if to enfold her beauty and treasure it in their hearts forever. Delicately stepping forward on her rose-petal feet, she scanned the lines of royalty for one beloved face. Suddenly, she sighted Achyuta, the unchanging being, he who never falls and who never allows his devotees to fall. Sitting in his eagle-crested chariot, and smiling tenderly at her, was he to whom her heart had been given from the age of 5, dearer to her than her own self. Boldly she stepped forward, to the chariot that had been conveniently placed in the middle of the path. Now that she was sure he had come, she lowered her eyes, but as she reached the chariot, her delicate hand, laden with jewels, was raised as if to make it easier for him to grasp it. Seeing this, Krishna smiled, and bending down, he lifted her up to the seat beside him, slowing deliberately and in full view of her brother and the other princes, like a lion lifting its prey from amidst a pack of jackals. He then whipped up the horses and flew through the crowded streets. Citizens made way for him and cheered wildly, for they were filled with joy at the thought that their prayers had been answered. As if mesmerized, the rest of the kings watched this drama of the princess being abducted right under their noses. Then pandemonium broke loose. Precious minutes were lost trying to clear the roads of the citizens and soldiers who had blocked it as soon as the lovers had gone. Violently angry at the sight of their names, the other kings pursued the pair. They were stalled by Balram and the Yadava army, who had arrived on scene in the nick of time. Sensing his bride's fear, the Lord reassured her with a smile. Seeing the determined resistance of the Yadava forces, Jarasandha and the other kings gave up and returned, for such incidents were commonplace in most Swayambars. Rukmi, however, was determined not to give in, for he had given his word to his friend Shishupal and did not know how he could face him if the bride was not brought back. He caught up with the eloping couple and challenged Krishna to a duel. Krishna defeated him but refrained from killing him at Rukmini's entreaties. He satisfied himself with cutting off Rukmini's top knot, which was considered to be an insult worse than death. Balram reprimanded Krishna for having done such a thing to his brother-in-law. Krishna merely smiled, for he knew that a time would come when this brother would have reason to do a much graver injury to him. In the meantime, Jarasandha took upon himself the thankless task of comforting the bridegroom, who was still sitting in blissful ignorance of the stirring events which had just taken place. He had been lost in a beatific vision, in which he was sporting with his beautiful bride in the enchanted goddess of the palace that he had specially built for her, and which he had even named after her, so sure had he been of his prize. He was rudely jolted out of his reverie by the booming voice of Jarasandha. Wake up, O heroic prince, let us be off." "Where? What?" stammered Shishupal. "Has the auspicious time come for the groom to enter the marriage hall? Has the bride returned after praying at the temple?" "She has not only come, but she has also gone," said the unfeeling Jarasandha. He then enlightened the poor groom as to the true state of affairs. Shishupal was quite unbroken, and Jarasandha consoled him. "Do not lose heart over such a trifle as the loss of a bride. I'll find you a much better one. Look at me, I remain equal in victory and defeat. I was defeated by Krishna 17 times, yet I am not bothered. Today they are victorious because time is in their favor. When the tide of time turns in our favor, we will defeat them and recapture your bride." "But I don't want someone better," protested Shishupal. "I want Rukmini. I've even named my new palace after her." "Well, you'll just have to rename it," said Jarasandha coldly, "for Rukmini has been abducted by that rascally coward Krishna, while you have been sitting here and dreaming." "Can't we go after him?" Shishupal inquired anxiously. "We did, and we were defeated. But Rukmini has not given up. He chased after them." "Was he able to bring her back?" Shishupal asked. "No," said Jarasandha shortly. "Krishna insulted him by removing his topknot, and he has sworn not to return to Kundinapal until he has killed Krishna." Without wasting time in further useless conjecture, he proceeded to hustle the dejected Shishupal out of the groom's palace and back to his own country. Defeated and deprived of his army and name, Rukmini resolved to stay alone at a palace called Bhojakata, where he nursed his grievance against Krishna and swore not to enter his capital until he had killed him and rescued his sister, and thus erased the blot on his fair name. In the meantime, Dwarka, the capital of the Yadus, was preparing itself to welcome the royal couple. The citizens were thrilled to hear of the romantic abduction of the princess of Vidarbha by Krishna, and the couple was met with joyous hails of welcome. The wedding was conducted on a grand scale, as if it had been the marriage of Lord Vishnu with Lakshmi Devi, as indeed it was, for was Krishna not the incarnation of Vishnu, and Rukmini of Lakshmi? Thus ends the 14th chapter of the Play of God, named The Abduction of Rukmini. Hari Om Tat Sat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.